I just want to start out with just a simple statement, and that is friends make the ordinary extraordinary. You can just be like driving over to grab food. You can be out doing something in the yard. You can be doing whatever, whenever. And if you have a friend there with you, something that would be normally mundane and can just be the funnest thing on the planet. I was having a pastor's meeting with Brian here this past week, and he got to picking on me, and I was laughing so hard I was crying. Just in case you ever wonder what goes on in pastors' meetings, we just pick on each other until one of us cries. Anyway, just kidding. But it's true. And here's the other thing. Friends are not only good for our souls, they're good for our bodies. You're more likely to recover from a sickness if you have friendship. Your body's immune system is stronger and you're less likely to get sick. Did you know that a friend actually lowers your cholesterol? So, husbands, you can tell your wives, look, I wouldn't go play golf, but Pastor Joe said it lowers my cholesterol. I think I have to go. Just doing this for my health, honey. But it's true. It actually prolongs our life to have healthy friendships. And having said that, I want to say that thank some of you for being friends in my life. You guys have been a blessing to me, because friendship, I mean, if you look at it, friendship really is a gift and a blessing from God. And one of the reasons that we know that is because so many people struggle in the area of friendship. The statistics tell us that 5 out of 6, women only generally have 5 or 6 women that they call close friends. And studies show that it's actually very difficult to develop these close friendships. A nationally syndicated columnist recently wrote, "I'm lonely and it saddens me. How could I not have enough friends? It seems as though every woman's friendship quota is filled and she's no longer accepting new applicants." She said, "It's easy to fill your day with work, but it's just not enough." And with a group this size, I'm sure that there are at least 1 or 2 of you that feel what she's saying. Most women can identify, like I said, 5 or 6 close friends. Most men can't identify even one. 90% of men report that they do not have one single close friend. There have never been so many people on earth, and people have never been so alone. One man ran an ad in a Kansas City newspaper that read, "I will listen to you talk for 30 minutes without comment for $5.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right?
Wow.
Well, he was actually serious. And shortly after putting that ad in, he was receiving 10 to 20 calls a day for people who needed to talk. We were made for relationship, and when that area of our lives is lacking, we're simply left empty, void, and hurting. According to Los Angeles psychiatrist Dr. Leonard Zunin, we meet more people in 1 year than our ancestors just 100 years ago used to meet an entire lifetime. We meet more people in 1 year than they met in their entire life. And he went on to say, despite that fact, loneliness is the main problem facing Americans today. Thomas Wolfe, the American writer, wrote an essay entitled On Loneliness at 23. He thought that loneliness was something that was suffered especially, perhaps even uniquely, by the young. And for a time he thought himself probably the most lonely person on the earth. But gradually, he came to a broader conclusion, and he wrote this. He wrote, "The whole conviction of my life now rests upon the belief that loneliness, far from being a rare and curious phenomenon peculiar to myself and a few other solitary men, is the central and inevitable fact of human existence. There have never been so many people on the earth, and people have never been so alone." I was online and I was reading some people's stories about themselves. And a girl named Chloe Kidd on experienceproject.com wrote this. She said, "I'm not a normal person who is lonely at present or has been lonely for a few years. I've never had anyone. I just simply didn't realize it. I grew up in a family that looked all right on the outside, but was all dysfunctional on the inside. And I pretty much felt isolated. I had buddies at school, but I almost never met with them beyond school. I never really planned on being lonely for good, but somehow later in life, I never leaned on others for some emotional support. It never even occurred to me. I didn't even realize how different I was from others. I'm a loner with good superficial social skills and entirely normal looking elsewhere. But I'm abnormal and I'm afraid. I've never had a single true friend or a person who was close, who I could rely on and feel easy around and have fun with. Nor did I ever have family in a real sense. I've always been lonely and all alone. I think it's hopeless." And the problem is she's just one story of a million. One more time, there have never been so many people on the earth, and people have never been so alone. So what's the answer? Does God have an answer for loneliness? Well, God seems to have an answer for everything, doesn't He? He does have an answer for loneliness. And the answer is seated right next to you, or right in front of you, or right behind you, or somewhere around you. Or at least, let me say this, at least the bridge to the real answer is right there next to you. John 13:35 says, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." John 15:12 says, "This is my commandment, love each other in the same way I have loved you." 1 Peter 1:22, love one another deeply from the heart. 1 John 4:7 and 8 kind of sums it all up. He says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." So what he's basically saying there is, God's love, so if you're from Him, you're going to be loving the people around you. Matter of fact, if you don't love the people around you, you don't know God. That's basically what he's saying. So what was God's answer? It's real simple. It's love is God's answer. The first commandment is that we love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. The second is like it, and it is simply love the brother, sister, the people around you. So that's his answer to loneliness. And here's the thing. I read a lot of posts preparing for this message. And I kept hearing over and over and over and over again, in all of the loneliness, they were all looking for one thing. They were all looking to be loved. And the thing was, is they weren't looking for, tens or hundreds or thousands of people to love them. Over and over they said, I would be okay if just one person loved me for who I am. So I thought about this, and here's the situation. We have this world filled with lonely people, and God's great command to us is to love. Kind of fits like a glove, doesn't it? It's like God's greatest command for us perfectly fills the greatest need in our generation. With that said, I'm sitting there and I'm scratching my head. I'm thinking, Lord, we're talking about, moving through 100 this year and on over to wherever we end up as a church. And I thought, my goodness, we're doing something wrong. Because the people all around us are dying for someone to love them. We're commanded to love them. And this place right here should be the most attractive place in the world, because we should be loving one another the way, as Jesus put it, the way I've loved you. And I'm thinking, where's the breakdown? And the breakdown's really simple. The breakdown's one little word. We would be the most attractive place on earth for people to come if we would love like Jesus told us to. And the breakdown is that little two-letter word, if we would love the way Jesus told us to. Thinking our big issue is that we need to start loving each other the way God told us to love. God created man, and He knew exactly what we would long for. And then He made that the second greatest command of all. The greatest command is to love the Lord your God. The second is like unto it, Jesus said. It's to love your neighbor as yourself. God created every person out there walking. He knew what they'd be dying for. And I'm thinking, why aren't 1,000 people in here right now? Because there's at least 1,000 people walking around Middletown that are lonely, walking around Frederick that are lonely, walking around Hagerstown that are lonely. I remembered you. So, that's God's plan. It's really simple. I love how simple God keeps it. I need that simplicity for me. For nobody else, I need it for me. He just says to go out and love the people around you. But then the question comes back, okay, that's His plan. Is it effective? Does it work? When people were asked how they came to be Christians, they responded as follows. Primary influence in coming to Christ. 4% came to Christ through a visitation or cold calling by a church. Somebody walking up, knocking on your door, have you come to that place in your spiritual life where you know for certain if you were to die tonight, you would go to heaven? And then from there they would go on and they would talk to them and they would pray with them, lead them to Christ. 4% came from that. 5% came from big events like crusades, like the big Billy Graham crusades that used to be here, or big, big name band concerts, that kind of thing. 5% came from that. 5% came from Sunday school classes, which honestly surprises me. I thought that it would be higher for Sunday school. Because generally, if you don't reach kids, by the time they're hit their teens, it's a struggle from there. Kids generally come to Christ sometime between K and 5th grade. That's a very important time in their lives. So 5% came from Sunday school class. 6% came from contact with pastors and church leaders. You know, and I mentioned just last week, somebody called me up. That's an example. It's just, you know, I'll call the pastor. The pastor will know what to do. And so you pray, and they come to Christ. %, or 4 out of 5 people that come to Christ, they come to Jesus through friendship. They come through relationship. God, wow, He's smart. Isn't He smart? He knew exactly how He created man. And He knew exactly the bridge He needed to build to get men to Himself. That bridge is you. That bridge is me. 80% of people who make it to God are there because someone was simply a friend to them. So are you loving God? Excuse me, are you loving people the way that God wants you to? The people that walk in and out of your life, that He brings to your life, are you loving them the way you're supposed to? Got a rather extreme example here of one, and I share this with you just because I had never heard this before. So I want to share with you this story. A lot of people were shocked when in early August 1995, Flip Benham, National Director for Operation Rescue. Operation Rescue tries to talk to girls before they go into an abortion clinic and tries to get them not to abort the baby, but to have the baby and save the baby. That's what Operation Rescue does. So the National Director of Operation Rescue baptized Norma McCorvey, the woman known as Jane Roe, in the U.S. Supreme Court's 73 Roe versus Wade decision. She came to Christ through the friendship of Benham and Operation Rescue workers who opened an office next to her clinic. It was an abortion clinic. Benham and the folks at the Operation Rescue office befriended her and began to pray for her. She became so much a friend of these guys that she would go over there sometimes and hang out with them, and the phone would ring and she would pick up, and this is before she came to Christ or anything else, she'd pick up the phone when the people were busy with folks that were counseling with these young girls. So the friendship had gotten pretty far along and pretty deep. And one day, when she was at their office, she glanced at one of the posters on the wall. She said it was like blinders fell off. She said for the first time, it just hit her like a wave. She was looking at a poster, and there was a 10-week-old baby in the mother's womb. And she suddenly saw with perfect clarity that that was, in fact, a child. And all of the first trimester, second trimester, third, none of it meant anything. God stepped in and in one moment just pulled it all away and let her see that is a child. She later landed in the church and gave her heart to Christ. She left her abortion clinic and went next door and began working for Operation Rescue. And she's become one of the stronger advocates for outlawing abortion. She even tried to overturn her own previous decision in the Supreme Court. She took back to court the Roe versus Wade and tried to get that overturned. Friendship is a powerful, powerful bridge. And the thing is, there's a gap between God and man. And that gap is huge. It's distant. It's sin in the middle of it, and it's like a barrier that cannot be fought or broken through. And I like that song, like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down. What a perfect image for us. We're supposed to become the bridge that gets them to God. God made Christian love. God's love being lived through us. And that's why I played that song earlier. That song was talking about God's love is the love that comes in me. And then I'm able to give it out. His love lived through us. God designed to be that bridge. Flesh and blood bridges between where men and women are and where God is. God left us here to fill a need so deep and so profound that it will carry them all the way to Himself. Here's the thing. What He put in man, He put a God-sized hole. And that God-sized hole can be filled by absolutely nothing else but Him. He kind of made it their own homing beacon. And what our job is to do is our job is to go out and love them and give them the taste of what they are literally dying for. Suicide rates are extremely high. You remember the thing I said about 90% of the men in our country can't name one close friend? Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide. I mean, literally, people are dying for lack of friendship, for lack of love. For lack of... See, here's the thing about love and friendship. It actually makes you feel like you're worth something. God designed us to be in relationship. God designed us for us to get joy and health and life and all kinds of other things out of good and proper friendship through love. He put that homing device in us that draws us back to Him. Why? Because He is love. Remember? 1 John 4:7-8, He's the source, and He is, in fact, love. We need Him. Man desperately needs love. We're here to give them a taste of what they really long for and point them to the true source. It's the second greatest of all commands and fills the greatest need of our generation. Last week we talked about letting God pick people for us that we can begin praying for them. This week we're going to go out of here and the people that He's picked for us and we've started praying for, we're going to start loving. Hopefully you've been loving them last week. In fact, if you've been praying for them, you've been loving them. But remember this, love is actually something that you do. Nothing about love is passive. Love is something that you do. It's something that you make a decision and go and do. This week we're going to leave, and the people that God has directed us to be praying for and loving, we're going to go, we're going to pray for them, and we are simply going to fulfill what we are supposed to be doing, and that's loving them. But I just wanted to tell you what I told you before this point to prepare you. Because there are some people that when you love them, it's going to be like a light. Like an explosion goes off in them because they're dying for it. Find somebody and love them. And then watch what God does. Here's the thing. Love by itself, friendship by itself is an amazing thing. But when God is involved in it, step back and watch what God does. God has good things in store. Jesus, again speaking, said, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another."